It's saddening knowing how many people know the facts but still aren't willing to make the change. Oftentimes, it's the photographs, the footage, the paintings and drawings, the propaganda that instills a will and need for change. They create the most moral shock, which occurs when an image, story, or incident outrages people enough to motivate them to participate in a social movement. It's also critically important to listen to the messages of these animal activists and artivists. An innumerable amount of lives could be saved, both animals and humans, and so many environmental problems would have solutions. I wanted to highlight the active relationship between art and animals, showing how art has greatly influenced and been a tool in animal activism since the 1800s. Over 100 years ago, a series of photographs were taken in Australia that played a significant role in international efforts to achieve legislative protection of wild birds. The photographs surfaced at the peak of a vigorous campaign on both sides of the Atlantic, which had been prompted by the phenomenal growth of the plumage trade. The use of bird feathers and other body parts in women's hats and clothing. Literally millions of birds were killed annually and thousands of tons of feathers were imported to feed the demands of the fashion industry. Unexpectedly, however, perhaps one of the greatest image-based impacts was produced by a series of photographs taken on the other side of the world. In 1906, a keen bushman, photographer, and conservationist named Arthur Mattingly spent 10 days camping at a tiny settlement on the banks of the Murray River in the New South Wales, also a major egret hatchery in the St. Helena Swamp. Impressed by what he had seen, he decided to return a month later so he could photograph egrets feeding their newly hatched chicks. But as he and his companion returned to the hatchery, they were greeted by a sickening sight, and what had happened was clear. Since his first visit, shooters had gone through the area, killing or maiming the adult egrets, taking their valuable plumes, and leaving the baby egrets to die of starvation or fall helplessly out of their nests. Outraged and now on a mission, Mattingly carefully photographed the scene of devastation. The bill was reintroduced in 1920, and after a compromise was reached about having a schedule of prohibited species rather than a blanket ban, and it was eventually passed the following year. The persistence with which it was waged on various fronts, including Mattingly's documentary-style photography, also proved a more general lesson for the ecological campaigns that are still being fought up to this present day. Born in 1951 in Liverpool and growing up next to a hog farm and slaughterhouse, she awoke each morning to the screams of pigs. Since then, Sue Coe creates images to portray the horrors of factory farming practices and how gruesome and hard it is to look at. She's an artivist and is known for her stark renderings of victims and their tormentors. In the mid-70s, she published many drawings illustrating violence by the KKK, famine in Africa, AIDS, and terrorism in Northern Ireland. Coe then shifted her focus to the atrocities of factory farming. Coe has been a crusader against the use of animals in industry, medical research, genetic engineering. From 1986 to 1992, she went to slaughterhouses in the U.S., Canada, and England, recording by camera and video the horrors she witnessed, and when not allowed, in her sketchbook. She gained access to stockyards, a meat packing plant, free-range cattle ranch, dairies, and egg factories. She's been so close to the facts, I believe that is all she can deliver, because Coe leaves nothing to the imagination, each image imbued with a meaning that goes far beyond aesthetic beauty. Her work makes a pointed statement about corporate corruption. These works force the viewer to confront their meat consumption in a very real way. Porkopolis is a fascinating and appalling series of paintings, for the emotional, expressive way Coe has painted them, but for the way the artist leads us to finally confront and consider our willingness to maintain the mental blinders of oppression when it suits us. Porkopolis is a graphic illustration of Coe's research into the multi-billion-dollar farm food production industry. This is the gross side of a fast food hamburger and the all-you-can-eat rib dinner, a womb-to-slaughterhouse look at animals, well, mostly pigs, raised to feed a nation. It's damning. Shivering animals standing in blood watch as those before them are shot and strung up on hooks to bleed and then dismembered. It's all there, the gore, the detail-rich bits of visual information that let you know this is reality. Observed on one of Coe's trips to 15 slaughterhouses, not simply invented to make a non-issue volatile. Yet Coe's skillful manipulation of painting's emotional tools makes her images alluring, even when her subjects are repellent. Ko uses darkness like a liquid, living web, ensnaring, isolating, and menacing the denizens of her cavernous drawings. Usually inky, it occasionally congeals into thick, clotting rivers or tangible poisonous atmospheres. Light is always theatrical, harsh, and aimed like a gun. Her paintings are sharp, unforgiving, and so carefully exaggerated for that effect that it stages animal and human bodies into dramatically choreographed dances that reel with emotion, vileness, or debasement. Although her work hasn't changed any laws, yet, her art has strengthened those that supported her image and awakens those who are unaware of the horrors of the factory farming industry. In conclusion, art has been and will continue to be an influence and a tool for animal activism because of the immense impact it can hold, of its ability to make the audience feel the helplessness from the voiceless.